Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining AMGC Connect's webinar on metal additive manufacturing delivered by Additive Assurance. We'll give everybody one more minute to join for those that are just running from their last meeting. We'll get going imminently. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining AMGC Connect for our webinar on metal additive manufacturing, delivered by Additive Assurance and David Menzies, who's joining us today. So we'll get underway with the webinar in a moment, but just for those that are first-time IGP participants joining our webinar series, I'd just like to take you through a little bit of background on AMGC. So AMGC is the peak body representing Australian manufacturing and manufacturers. We provide services and solutions on all things manufacturing to both industry and government. We and our network represent about 220,000 employees across the country with a network that is 12,000 strong and a membership base of 4,400 companies. We are active in areas of co-investment and management of government funds. We run a range of networking and thought leadership events, as well as our offering as part of the industry growth program, of which you are all members of. If I could have the next slide. Specifically for IGP participants, we have a service offering that is can be summarised in three key areas. Our one-to-one services are where you engage directly with some of our team members to provide advice tailored for your specific needs. And that could be solving a challenge. It could be finding access to facilities or experts in particular areas. It could be helping you solve a supply chain issue, or tapping into some advice around your industry growth program applications and so forth. So if you are interested in engaging with AMGC and its network, please talk to your advisor and ask them for a referral through to us. We then have our one-to-few offerings where we are doing things like best practice tours, taking you out to see what good looks like within industry. Could also be access to facilities so that you can get an understanding of what you might need as you move towards your commercialized product or service. And then our one-to-many offerings, which is our webinar series and other self-led learning opportunities. So today is one of the one-to-many. Next slide, please. And today we're joined by Dr. David Menzies from Additive Assurance. Additive Assurance is a company that AMGC knows well. We worked with them to help in part commercialise their product. And their product and services is all around guaranteeing and assisting with the quality of additive manufactured products. So I'm not going to speak for much longer because you're here to hear from David and the team. We will now switch our slides from AMGC to David's and we'll get underway. While the transfer is happening of the presentation, just a reminder that if you do have any questions on the journey today, please place it up in the Q&A box. We will get to them at the end of the presentation. If for some reason we do have a lot of questions and we don't get to them, we will come back to you following the webinar. So without any further of me rabbiting on, David, I'd like to hand the reins to you and thank you for taking the time to talk about both additive manufacturing and the great services and products that you have at hand.
All right, thanks, Tyson. Just firstly, is my screen up now? Yep, perfect. Thanks for the opportunity from Tyson and Advanced Manufacturing Growth Centre. We've, as he mentioned before, had a long relationship together. We were a previous grant recipient under one of the grant programs that the AMGC ran a number of years ago, and also need to acknowledge the predecessor of the industry growth program, Accelerating Commercialisation, which we were also a grant recipient for during the development of our product. Bear with me. There we are. So I don't want to dwell too much on what additive manufacturing is, but I have put a couple of slides here just to really narrow down to the slice of additive manufacturing where we sit, and then what the challenges are and how we're helping the industry to address those challenges. So additive manufacturing or 3D printing, it's effectively building up three-dimensional parts from CAD as opposed to subtractively milling them out of a block of metal, for example. This has some advantages in some industries through decreased cost and time, through smarter design of existing parts, but more importantly, what we're seeing now with our customer base is them being able to unlock new design potential. The machines are getting larger and able to offer a broader set of parts that can now be manufactured through these processes. Obviously, not all traditionally manufactured parts lend themselves to this process, but it is something that has found niches in some critical industries to date. And with the cost of machines coming down per part, either through the processes getting bigger or the machines getting more cost effective, we're seeing that new industries are taking on this technique to manufacture some of its components, parts, or finished product. So additive manufacturing, there's a large swathe of different techniques here. Some of them are suitable for different processes. A lot of them have started off as a prototyping tool, but are now moving into production. What we're going to focus in on is powder bed fusion, and in particular the laser-based powder bed fusion, which is the area that we operate in, which is largely referred to in general as metal additive manufacturing. So for those not familiar with it, it's effectively a bed of powder that is spread across a building plate, and that's done with a recoating bar, and then a laser scans a pattern on that XY plane, and then another layer is then deposited, and then the laser is activated again to then start building that part layer by layer. These machines obviously started with a pretty small build depth, but they're now moving up to around 2 meters in depth now to build very large parts. Having said that, most machines that are in deployment to date are still the smaller format machines, where you're looking at around 300 millimeter by 300 millimeter XY plane, and a depth of anywhere around, say, 400 to 500 millimeters. So scaling from prototype production has been the challenge over the years. Obviously, there was a lot of early adoption of these processes, and they were largely focused on that prototyping phase. There was obviously a large take-up from the research community to unlock new potential, but some of the more critical industries like aerospace, defence, and medical took on these capabilities quite early on to understand whether they can get any advantages over their traditional manufacturing routes. What's happened over that sort of 20, 30-year journey is the machines have improved a lot. The quality of the powders have improved, so less contamination, which create defects. The number of alloys that are available have dramatically increased to expand the window of production for these machines, and early producers broke through those critical regulatory barriers. What's happening in the regulatory space for this is there are some changes occurring with ASTM and NASA standards, which I'll talk about later, which sort of really puts a bit more emphasis on monitoring the build as it's going, as opposed to what has been occurring in the past, which is more post-process inspection. So right now there are a lot of manufacturers that are producing end products with these processes. It's obviously still a small slither of the overall manufacturing field, but it is expanding as we speak. So the critical things for moving from prototype to production in this field, and I'm focusing a bit more on the critical industries, First, there needs to be process control developed. There's obviously quite a lot of modelling required to achieve the desired end product. A lot of material properties need to be tested. That's not only just the basic material properties, but it's also the design-related properties that are occurring as a result. In the prototyping, obviously a lot of work is getting done on making sure defects are minimised. So the manufacturers in this space do quite a lot of work on iterations in that design cycle to minimise the defects that will occur. Then there's a scaling across each build plate, moving from a single part with a whole bunch of other variants around it to moving to that final part across the build plate. So you might move from one part to 50 across a build plate, for example. The final steps are really around your traditional economics in production. So looking at the cost and the productivity factors that are at play. And then there's the regulatory acceptance, which some industries have very minimal barriers, and some industries have some quite high barriers to jump over. So a couple of examples of things that are produced using laser powder bed fusion, and if you're aware of these and more, these are just a couple of examples. In the medical field, there's an example by Stryker. There's quite a lot of implants that are produced using additive manufacturing, which gives them a lot of advantages over the traditional routes that they were operating in. In aerospace, a lot of the engine component manufacturers have consolidated production by combining a lot of traditional parts into single parts to get that productivity up in the overall assembly. Defense is another big sector for metal additive manufacturing. That's an example of a suppressor, which is one of the highest produced components in metal additive manufacturing globally. You can see there it's quite an intricate, detailed part, but there's obviously a lot of aerospace style components that go into the defense sector as well. And in energy, so energy is one that's very similar to the example with aerospace, where multiple parts are consolidated to improve the overall cost and productivity of the final product. But those ones are getting unlocked further and further and further now that the powder bed fusion machines are getting larger, which unlocks a lot more design consolidation opportunities for those manufacturers. So we're seeing quite a lot of improvement in the quality across these manufacturers. They have had to obviously go through their regulatory barriers and their scaling factors to get into production. But what we are seeing is they are adopting it at scale now. So some of these manufacturers will have, I guess, what you'd more call a farm of 3D printers, where they may have anywhere between, say, 20 and 100, all operating continuously together to produce these parts for their global supply chains. I guess one area though that has held back the industry to a degree has been really how to assure that you have the right quality, which is what we focused on as a business. So obviously with complex shapes possible, traditional inspection can be hard, especially with more denser alloys. It's very hard to CT scan very thick bits of Inconel, for example. So what happens is testing coupons are printed next to a part to use as an analog for part quality. So it's not a direct measurement; it's an indirect measurement, which is fine. It's approved by the regulatory bodies, but it is something that is not a direct measurement. These parts are now getting bigger, which makes it even harder to do a lot of the traditional inspection. So there is a lot of push within the industry to work out ways to not remove post-process inspection, but to adopt these in situ monitoring techniques to cover the areas that can't be traditionally inspected. Which comes to the final question of how can you adequately sign off the quality of production, which is the opening topic we have with most of our customers. So there's a few different common techniques that are used in particular in laser powder bed fusion. So there's optical imaging. A lot of the machines come with that already built in there to really monitor that powder bed to check that is something that is not getting disturbed. So that really just gives you some geometric information, which is helpful. There's infrared thermography, which is a field that we sit in, which is looking at that melt pool, so where the laser is melting the powder, which is where your defects are formed. There's fringe projection, which is basically scanning a pattern over that XY plane to look at the topography as well as the geometry. And to a lesser extent, people are looking at acoustic and eddy current style techniques to really look at more your macro style defects across the production. So I'll jump into, I guess, what our product is. I'll probably slow down my talking now because there's a bit more depth in this. So what we have is a monitoring solution that is retrofittable across a large range of the laser powder bed fusion machines that are currently available. And in that box, you can see on the left, there are 8 near-infrared cameras, and those near-infrared cameras are set up to look at 4 different quadrants of a build plate to then achieve a high-resolution image that is stitched together. So we've developed some machine learning algorithms to take that raw data, re-stitch it all together as a single image, and then really start tracking the defects as they form in that Z direction as you get that layer by layer production occurring. And to visualize that, there's a software package that allows for fault identification and the ability for operators to either cease production or to make some changes to improve the quality outcome. So on this image here, that's a Renishaw machine. So what we have there is our sensor package. It's looking through that build chamber window that you may be aware of on the front of these machines. We are looking in that near infrared range, so the build chamber windows typically don't have any filtration there, which means that we're able to look through that window. We've got a mounting setup that takes probably less than 30 minutes to get on. There's obviously some calibration that occurs after that. With the machines in this category, there is anywhere between 1 and 64 lasers that are shooting the build plate. Obviously 64 is an extreme. I think there's only maybe 1 or 2 examples of that in the world. Most are between 1 and 4 lasers. And obviously with an imaging technique like this, we're able to resolve that without having any interference with the number of lasers. And it doesn't affect the machine warranty on those machines. So we're not breaking into the hood to then mess about with the setup, which would then get you back to a position as a manufacturer of needing to qualify your production machine again. So this is just I guess a snapshot of a couple of the different machines that we operate on. There's a couple of variants of our product to cover different machine sizes, but it is something that we are using across a range of the machines across the sectors that we operate in. So these machines we're manufacturing them in our site in Oakley South in Melbourne. So anyone visiting Melbourne or based in Melbourne, we're more than happy to have you visit us to have a bit of a chat. But I guess moving down to the nuts and bolts of it, we're looking at that melt pool layer. So we're resolving that build plate in a long exposure mode. So we're taking that entire layer of information across those 8 cameras, stitching it together and getting a resolution image of 30 to 40 microns per pixel. That variation is really dependent on the industrial design of the equipment that we are operating on, depending on how close the window is to that build plate. effectively. So what we can see is effectively all the different types of defects across that melt pool layer. That is a false color image. We are seeing black and white through our lenses, but it's obviously easier to see that in color as an operator. So what we get on each individual layer here is melt stability. So you can see there's different tracks across going in the top to bottom direction there. That is the laser activity that's going across the melt pool. It's effectively a welding technique when you boil it down to it. And what we're looking for is changes in the geometry of those and the intensity, which is effectively what we call a texture. And through that texture, we can then determine if there are any defects occurring. Obviously, in a single layer, that's interesting. But if you are seeing it in the exact same XY coordinate across several layers, then you know you've got a problem occurring that needs to be actioned as a manufacturer. So the common defects in laser powder bed fusion that we're targeting are lack of fusion, which creates pores, keyhole collapse, spatter, which is obviously a problem when you have balding occurring across your build. And we can also see more sort of macro geometrical issues, such as those that are occurring in that powder layer from the recoater, or whether the part itself is having any level of distortion or warping occurring. I've used a PDF here as opposed to my PowerPoint. So on the right, that should be a video, but I know it would crash if I was to use that version. So I've just flattened it down to a single image. So it's a bit hard to see what's going on there, but there are two different colors of blue, and they are looking for pores within a test coupon there that are occurring. So those pores are anywhere between 50 and 500 microns in size, and we're able to detect them down with a 95% confidence at down to 82 microns, which is a lot better than other techniques have reported, which is more around the 500 micron level. And especially with lack of fusion, the defect size that becomes critical is a bit smaller than that resolution. So anywhere above 100 microns is where you want to be able to have a lot of confidence that you are seeing an issue. Again, I've flattened this image. It's a little bit easier to see there, but this here is looking at CT data correlating to our data that we are generating, and you can see there that the darker blue spots and the lighter blue spots, it's that they're all on top of each other, unfortunately, in this view. But the correlation of those is extremely high, which is the source of the data of how we can achieve the 95% confidence interval of around 80 micron defect size using this technique. One thing in manufacturing is obviously being able to identify a problem early. That's across any manufacturing technique, whether it's printing or milling or anything. In this context, obviously with laser powder bed fusion, they can be quite a slow process if you're building something quite high. And if you know something that is going to create a problem later on, you can stop that production if it's at that level. So this is an example of a manifold part where there was an issue starting at around layer 450 that resulted in catastrophic failure of the build further up that process. So this is an example of how you can identify issues early and make a change as that manufacturer either cease the production or change the parameters to suit. And this is one of the areas that is interesting to a lot of laser powder bed fusion manufacturers, regardless of the level of regulation across their production. So what we've done is we've tried to make this as simple as possible from a user perspective. So we end up with results of each layer within seconds of that build. That analysis is automated and issues are flagged. Those can go out as email notifications to the people that have been assigned to that production job on that machine, and you get detailed defect maps in both 2 and 3 dimensions to be able to locate where the issues are and do some changes if required to really improve the production there. The other thing that's critical in this industry is the quality assurance reporting. So we've got a whole bunch of automated outputs that occur at the end of each production run to really make it a lot easier to adopt this technology and have non-PhD qualified people interpret information and sign off on production, which has been an issue in the production of for producers of parts using laser powder bed fusion, where the average education level of the user has been required to be very high in the past, and we, as well as many others, are really trying to make that a lot easier so that a technician can interpret the information effectively and do the appropriate sign off. Here's an example of some, I guess, automated reports that can be spit out. This is a pretty simple one, looking at some bottle openers. Basically, there are 10 parts which we've called A grade, 38 B grade. Being a bottle opener, they're all fine, but 2 parts have failed. So this is really a technique to allow the quality department to effectively put the parts into different buckets for inspection, either directly past them or to investigate further. And one other technique we've put into play is really gold standard comparison. So that's looking at scanning a part, having that fully qualified in production and in quality inspection, and setting that as that gold standard, and doing direct comparisons of all subsequent production of that part across all build plates to then effectively give a go, no go, or pass, fail criteria to each of the parts across that build. And, wow, I raced through that, Tyson. I thought I was going to take another 10 minutes. That is the end of that presentation, but I am more than happy to take on as many questions as there are.
No problem, David. It's good listening to it, and yeah, sometimes the time does fly, but that gives us a good opportunity to tackle some questions as well. So we'll leave your details up on there for a moment, and then we'll flip over to another slide thereafter. But there is a question that was posed almost as we got underway from Peter, and Peter has two questions. The first one is, can lines per inch, and he's got in brackets 13,500, be achieved with 3D printing? And I'm not sure if this is directly in your wheelhouse, David.
It's probably not in my wheelhouse. I'd have to do some mental mathematics on how to convert that across. But the typical scan tracks that are getting used for these are around 100 to 140 microns, if that is comparable to the 13,500.
Okay. Peter, we might get you to send us an email in the background on that. And then David
happy
can also
to answer that offline. Yeah.
Chase that down. There's a second part to Peter's question, which was and David, you and I spoke about this, is the applicability to plastics, in Peter's case, specifically PET, transparent sheeting. Is this technology, or are there similar solutions for plastic additive products?
Yeah. At the moment, plastic additive manufactured products haven't been targeted by the industry. That's largely been due to the fact that the cost per part, or the cost of poor production, is not as high as aerospace parts, for example. I do think they will come in I think the techniques will be different. They probably wouldn't be looking at more the infrared thermography like what we do, but more your optical based inspection. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to that the cost benefit trade-off that sits there for that particular application.
No problem. I'd encourage anybody that listened to the presentation to put some questions up in the Q&A box where they can. But David, as a side, you know, the industry itself is evolving fairly
Mm,
rapidly. Um, and standards, we're all aware of the standard requirements for the medical industry or defense or other things.
mm.
Is there a move to look at this sort of system across additive manufacturing processes and companies that sort of gives you either a competitive advantage now or gets you ahead of some incoming standards or processes that are required?
Yeah. Yeah, so there are quite a lot of work groups going on, and they have been going on for at least 1 or 2 years now, in various bodies. So ASTM, European Space Agency, NASA, to name a few, are all updating their standards to really look at how these in-process inspection techniques can improve the quality outcome. We don't know where that's going to land, but those are obviously led by the industry leaders within those sectors that are looking at that, and they're all taking a very serious view on this. So there is a wave coming in, and as I said before, a lot of that is owing to the fact that the machine build volumes are getting larger, which means that traditional inspection is getting a lot harder. And obviously the peak bodies are wanting to support that innovation, but they also don't want to result in a system where there's catastrophic failure.
Great. Another question has rolled in, David, from Alex. And Alex has asked, could you please give us your thoughts on comparisons and considerations of choosing CNC versus additive manufacturing or other options for injection molding molds? And how does your tech shift considerations, example, economic, quality tolerance, and lifespan? So that's a pretty
Mm.
big question.
That's a loaded one. So I don't think additive manufacturing at the moment is going to be taking over CNC for tooling for most injection molding. It is getting used for inserts, so I guess smaller parts within a tool, which are a little bit hard to achieve with CNC. So at the moment, what we're seeing is that there are some big manufacturers globally that do nothing but make tooling for various industries. It's more the ones that are highly complicated to achieve through CNC where that is getting used at the moment. It is for the bulk, Alex. It's not something that is a direct replacement at this stage, and I think the economics don't quite stack up for it to be that at this point in time as well. But for the semiconductor industry, where there's a lot of I guess smaller features that are required, and designs that are required to achieve the right tooled outcome. There is quite a lot of additively manufactured tooling inserts, for example. So I view those two manufacturing processes as complementary at this stage.
Great, thank you. You mentioned something in there, and we've got a couple of other questions, but just something of my own. Inserts. Does that, Australian industry is nimble and
Mm.
niche, and that means short runs and, slight variations in products or services that are required. Does that mean that this could give you the opportunity to have short runs with minor changes, not by getting rid of the whole tooling, but putting in variations using AM?
Yes, it does. I mean, I wouldn't limit that to additive manufacturing for those inserts, Tyson. I think there's a place for all different manufacturing capabilities for that example, and it really just depends on what the design requirements are. If you're talking about just getting short runs done, that might be able to be achieved with inserts using softer alloys, which can dramatically reduce the cost of the tooling, for example. Um, so I mean, it's really design dependent, to be fair.
Yeah, no problem. Elena has asked a question, how are structural properties analyzed and measured? And I think this is specifically to your technology.
To our technology. Um, so the structural properties, we're effectively taking infrared images, and we are directly viewing them as a full 3D structure in the way that our software stitches those together. Um, they are not analyzed for strength, for example, in our software. That is something that needs to be correlated with the other modeling techniques to get the right result. We're more looking at whether the intended part is what you've achieved at the end in part of the quality assessment. Um, I hope that answered your question, Elena.
If it doesn't, Elena, again, just drop us an email and David can go away and consult the team, or we can get a bit more information on the question specifically. Um, George has asked a question. Are we at the stage where 3D stainless steel and neodymium can be put together?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously a lot of work done not only on alloying but also multi-material printing. Multi-material printing is certainly not a common practice now. I'm only aware of one machine in Australia that has that capability, and that's at CSIRO. And that one is targeted for development, uh, potentially of systems that complex. But it is still a very, very new field in the industry, the printing of multiple materials using metals. Um, so I can't give an example of that exact material set you're talking about, but I'm aware that there is a bit of work occurring with some of the manufacturers in unlocking that capability, um, although it is quite early days and there's probably not enough industry pull for it to expand rapidly.
Thanks, David. There was a second part to George's question submitted, and that was, could this be done through sintering? And again, if that's a really technical thing you'd prefer to answer offline, just let me know.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that offline with George. That's fine.
No problem. Um, Brody has both thank you for your presentation, but also asked, how does the level of quality assurance QA your approach? Sorry, let me start that again. How does the level of QA your approach delivers compare against the detail of QA available for typical cast parts? Sorry, struggled with that one, Dave.
Yeah. So what we're not saying with a product like ours or our competitors or collaborators, we're certainly not sitting there saying that we are a direct replacement for all other um, quality inspection techniques. They are things that need to be considered in collaboration rather than competition in that QMS sign-off process. It really depends on the criticality of the part, to be fair. If it's a non-critical part, but the business has a quality mandate that they need to understand each part that is produced, in that circumstance, there's probably a replacement that may occur, where they might be currently doing CT scanning for everything, which can be quite costly and time consuming, to then look at a replacement either in part or in full. But I do view the more critical industries, the defence, aerospace, medical, as ones where there will be a combination of both that will be occurring for some period of time to make sure that the appropriate quality is getting measured. Comparing it to cast, the level of inspection that occurs in most of the regulated applications for AM has been a bit more stringent than cast to date, and that's really just been because it's a new technique that isn't as trusted, and I think with in situ inspection, some of that can be alleviated a little bit to be a bit more aligned with what is occurring across casting and other traditional manufacturing processes. A good question.
There's some great questions. Now, David, the next one is from Sarah Dunstan. It is related to plastic and polymers, but you might be able to answer it. And if you don't, I'm sure you know someone that we could connect Sarah to. So
Yep.
they're currently 3D printing prototypes with ASA filament for its UV and high temperature properties.
Yep.
When going to injection molding, how do you choose a type of plastic? So again, this might just be out of your wheelhouse, but maybe there's someone that we can connect them to.
I am confident in saying it's not in my wheelhouse. Tyson, if you can connect after this, I'll think about who I can put that through to make sure that the question can get answered in the right way.
No problem. And Sarah, through our network as well, we might have a couple of people that we can put you in touch with. So I've got your details here and we'll be in touch. I'll just check if there's any other questions that have come through. I'd encourage people, if you do have any questions, to put them in the Q&A box. We've got a couple of minutes left. But David, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the interesting projects that Additive Assurance or companies that you've worked with locally or abroad, just in working through the challenges of the industry.
Yeah, I'll give a good local example. So we've had a long-term relationship with DST Group, Defence Science and Technology, and their focus has largely been on how to improve the certification processes for aerospace parts using techniques like ours. So they've done quite a lot of work in this field, and there was a presentation just recently, a couple of months ago, at RMIT, providing some of the results of that. But we should be publishing some information on the basis of that collaboration in the next few months to really show how that can improve that qualification and certification process. It kind of goes back to that whole sort of shift in the industry to really look at how the qualification and certification processes can be collapsed a lot because they are quite complicated, and do create a barrier to innovation, unfortunately. So that's a good one. We have done some other collaborations with aerospace companies, which I can't name in this forum, basically looking at the exact same thing, but obviously that they've been doing it directly with us to see what they can do about improving their certification and qualification processes, which is a big hot button for those in the aerospace sector. In less regulated sectors, I guess we've had a long-term user of our product in General Electric in their gas turbines division over in the US, and they've really been trying to work out how they can dramatically reduce or change some of their quality processes post-production to get a higher productivity through their factory. So that's been a long-term project with them in their R&D department, and we're going to be doing some additional work with those and others in that field for looking at how we can work together and achieve high quality outcomes for larger parts, which are now starting to come in with the larger machines that are now available. The post-process inspection for larger parts will be not impossible, but it would be cost prohibitive to be able to get those into service. So it's really looking at unlocking additional productive capacity with these manufacturers, which I find very interesting.
Excellent. We've got two more questions that have come through, David, so they're coming in at a reasonable speed. The next one is from Jai, and it's a two-part question. The first part being, what tolerance level can LPBF go up to, and can it create enclosed cavities?
So feature size. You will get things that collapse the smaller you get in any process. So what we see in some of our work, and we're not obviously doing work across all material sets, is that internal feature sizes, if you try and make them smaller than 100 micron, you will get a lot of cavitation and collapse. But it's highly dependent on your material properties there. We're looking at it from a defect side of things as opposed to an intended design attribute, but they are analogous to one another. But with laser powder bed fusion, it depends on your parameters that you're using in your system. So most people would be operating with, I guess, a scan size of say 100 to 140 microns, but in some circumstances that can be a lot smaller, but that just means that the time per build will be a lot higher. So we've got one user that's doing these down to 20 microns at the moment, which is incredibly conservative, but it's something that they feel is important for their production process. I hope that helps answer your question in terms of the resolution there in that manufacturing process.
Again, Jai, if you want to have a follow-up question, the great thing is that David has a very simple email address, and it's hello@additiveassurance.com. You can either email the team or us. Our email address is simple as well, connect@amgc.org.au. David, Alex has asked another question, and it's related to cost and usage. So with the additive assurance technology, is it mainly an upfront cost for setup and then low to negligible marginal cost per build, or are there ongoing costs associated with each usage or build?
My answer to how much is always how much have you got in your wallet, but that's not a suitable answer for this question. This is hardware that is software enabled. So for a system like ours, it's largely a capital cost up front with a small, effectively maintenance and support fee that rolls per annum. For example, for one of the machines here, for a small build plate size of 200 to 300 millimeters in size, our machines are of the order of $60,000 for the capital, and then a 5,000 support and maintenance package that occurs after the first anniversary. So it is a fraction of the cost of one of the machines. Obviously, these machines, if you're buying them new, anywhere between $500,000 and 15 million, depending on how big they are and what they're capable of. But I hope that answers your question. We don't charge per build that occurs. Obviously, that could be amortized internally with that thinking, but it's certainly not the way we operate as an organisation.
Excellent. we've got a couple of minutes left. George has posed another question again. If this is just slightly outside your wheelhouse, David, let me know.
Mm,
But is the integrity of the 3D metal print as good as machined? And I think that the answer to that's probably it depends, right?
correct. Yeah. Yeah. So it largely depends on what you're doing. You can obviously achieve high strength outcomes from both techniques. It is design dependent though. So where 3D printing comes into play is where subtractive manufacturing struggles. To be fair, it's really looking at the use cases where the design is such that it would be too awkward, or too many parts need to be welded together to achieve the same outcome. And obviously, if we're welding parts together, then you've got other strength-based issues.
Thanks. It's becoming clear through the Q&A that maybe we should look at running a webinar with a process provider, someone like Speed 3D. So if
Mm,
that's of interest to the people on this call, let us know because we can reach out to people like that in industry and have them come along and do a bit of a Q&A more on the properties of the products rather than the outcome and the QA element. Um, Look, David, if there's no other questions that roll through, it's always great to have a couple of other moments for people to grab lunch or get onto their ahead of their next meeting.
mm.
Look, I'd just like to thank you for the time. I think Alex has just posted a thing. Sorry, thank you again. This is a follow-on from Alex's earlier question, David.
Mm.
Wasn't specifically asking about cost, just whether the tech had per usage requirements, which got
Oh,
answered too. So
oh, perfect. No, it's good.
you've over-delivered there, which is great.
That's
Um,
that's what I try and achieve.
So, look, I'd like to thank you for taking the time. As I said, we've had a long relationship with Additive Assurance, and we've watched you guys go from idea to commercial operations, which has been great. Look, if anybody on the call wishes to engage with AMGC and our network, of which Additive Assurance is one, our details are up there on the screen. Please feel free to drop us a line or talk to your advisor about coming through to us. Again, this program is here to assist you, and so please take advantage of those services that are available to you. If anybody did want us to put on a webinar specifically about the properties of additive manufacturing, be it metal or polymers, please let us know, and we'd be happy to pull someone out of the network to do that. But beyond that, look, David, thank you again, and we'll let everybody get a 5-minute head start on whatever meets them at 1 o'clock. So thank you, and we'll speak to you all again soon at a nearby event. Thanks.
Thanks for the opportunity, Tyson.
No, thank you.